Hi, welcome back to day 77 of Bread, Bible reading every day at Just Direction. You know, right now we're reading in Judges and we're reading the story of Samson. Most people have all heard about the story of Samson and Delilah. Some people may think that it's a myth, but it's not. It is a true story, the story of Samson and Delilah, and you can find the truth written in the Word of God, in the Bible. So we're going to continue today. We've just read about, yesterday, about him, you know, with the riddle that he had done, and that, you know, they had the 30 companions that his mother had assigned him, you know, for the 7 days of celebration leading up to the wedding. His 30 companions wanted to solve the riddle because he promised them linen and clothes, you know, so they conned his wife, Samson's wife, into finding out what the riddle was. Well, the story does not get easier today as we continue in reading in that. So, you know, and then of course he went and he killed 30 men to supply the 30 clothes, and then he went back home to live with his father and mother and left his wife, and then his wife was given in marriage to his best man at the wedding. So it's a little bit of a soap opera drama here, but the story does not unfold well. So let's continue reading in chapter 15 of Judges. Later on, during the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat as a present to his wife. He said, "I'm going into my wife's room to sleep with her," but her father wouldn't let him in. "I truly thought you must hate her," her father explained, "so I gave her in marriage to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she. Marry her instead." Samson said, "This time I cannot be blamed for everything I am going to do to you Philistines." Then he went out and caught 300 foxes. He tied their tails together in pairs, and he fastened a torch to each pair of tails. Then he lit the torches and let the foxes run through the grain fields of the Philistines. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and the uncut grain. He also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. "Who did this?" the Philistines demanded. "Samson," was the reply, "because his father-in-law from Timnah gave Samson's wife to be married to his best man." So the Philistines went and got the woman and her father and burned them to death. I told you it doesn't get easier, the story here. "Because you did this," Samson vowed, "I won't rest until I take revenge on you." So he attacked the Philistines with great fury and killed many of them. Then he went to live in a cave in the rock of Edom. The Philistines retaliated by setting up camp in Judah and spreading out near the town of Lehi. The men of Judah asked the Philistines, "Why are you attacking us?" The Philistines replied, "We've come to capture Samson. We've come to pay him back for what he did to us." So 3,000 men of Judah went down to get Samson at the cave of rock in the rock of Edom. They know his power, or they would have never sent 3,000. They said to Samson, "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? What are you going to do to us?" But Samson replied, "I only did to them what they did to me." But the men of Judah told him, "We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." "All right," Samson said, "but promise that you won't kill me yourselves." "We will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines," they replied. "We won't kill you." So they tied him up with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. Samson arrived at Lehi. The Philistines came shouting in triumph. As Samson arrived in Lehi, the Philistines came shouting in triumph. But the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, and he snapped the ropes on his arms as if they were burnt strands of flax, and they fell from his wrists. Then he found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey. He picked it up and killed 1,000 Philistines with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, I've piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men." When he finished his boasting, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was named Jawbone Hill. Samson was now very thirsty and cried out to the Lord, "You have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans?" So God caused water to gush out of a hollow in the ground at Lehi, and Samson was revived as he drank. Then he named the place the spring of the one who cried out, and it is still in Lehi to this day. Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period when the Philistines dominated the land. Chapter 16. And catch that, Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period when the Philistines dominated the land. Chapter 16. One day, Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. Word soon spread that Samson was there, so the men of Gaza gathered together and waited all night at the town gates. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, when the light of morning comes, we will kill him. But Samson stayed in bed only until midnight. Then he got up, took hold of the doors of the town gate, including the 2 posts, and lifted them up, bar and all. He put them on his shoulders and carried them all the way to the top of the hill across from Hebron. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. Then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So now this is the first time. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong and what it would take to tie you up securely. Samson replied, if I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I would become as weak as anyone else. So the Philistines' rulers brought Delilah new bowstrings, and she tied Samson up with them. She had hidden some men in one of the inner rooms of her house, and she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snaps when it's burned by a fire. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Here's the second time. Afterward, Delilah said to him, you've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now please tell me how you can be tied up so securely. Samson replied, if I were tied up with brand new ropes that had never been used, I would become as weak as anyone else. So Delilah took new ropes and tied him up with them. The men were again hiding in the inner room as before, and again Delilah cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But again, Samson snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thread. And the third time, then Delilah said, you've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me how you can be tied up securely. Now you would think at this point that Samson, maybe he's just decided, I'm going to go ahead and play these games with Delilah. Maybe he feels, maybe it excites him, sadly, but he continues to play with these games with her instead of, knowing that she's setting a trap for him. Samson's not dumb. We already know that. So why does he continue to play these games with her? Then Delilah said, you've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me how you can be tied up securely. Samson replied, if I were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on your loom and tighten it with the loom's shuttle, I would become as weak as anyone else. So while he slept, Delilah wove the 7 braids of his hair into the fabric. Then she tightened it with the loom shuttle. Again she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson woke up, pulled back the loom shuttle, and yanked his hair away from the loom and the fabric. Then Delilah pouted. How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You've made fun of me 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. She tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. Finally, Samson shared his secret with her. My hair has never been cut, he confessed, for I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as anyone else. Now, Samson is wrong in thinking that the strength is in his hair. That's just a symbol of his strength, but his strength is from the Lord. But his hair is the symbol of that. Delilah finally realized he had now told her the truth. So he sent for the Philistine rulers. Come back one more time, she said. And she's got to be feeling pretty stupid and foolish because she's falling for all of this, and she keeps going to them. And she's kind of being the quintessential dumb blonde in this. But we know she's not blonde, by the way. But anyway, she's got to be feeling pretty foolish herself as she's doing this. But what does she do? She entices them again. She goes to the Philistines again. Samson has to know that this is going to happen. He has to know what she's going to be doing. But yet, he falls for it again. Come back one more time, for he has finally told me his secret. So the Philistine rulers, and Delilah may not truly have known if this was true, but she's going to go for it again. So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep, and catch that now they returned with the money in their hands. So they all believe this really is the time. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and then she called in a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. And It's hard for me to imagine that he could have been so sound asleep that he would not have known this was happening. But Samson was not following everything God wanted him to be doing. Samson was placing his strength within himself instead of in the Lord. Then she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." When he woke, he thought, "I will do as before and shake myself free." But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. But before long, his hair began to grow back. The Philistine rulers held a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. They said, "Our God has given us victory over our enemy Samson." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy to us. The one who has killed so many of us is now in our power." Half drunk by now, the people demanded, "Bring out Samson so he can amuse us." So he was brought from the prison to amuse them, and they had him stand between the pillars supporting the roof. Samson said to the young servant who was leading him by the hand, "Place my hands against the pillars that hold up the temple. I want to rest against them." Now the temple was completely filled with the people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof who were watching as Samson amused them. Samson was their entertainment. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me again. Oh God, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes." Then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple. Pushing against them with both his hands, he prayed, "Let me die with the Philistines." And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had done in his entire lifetime. Later, his brothers and other relatives went down to get his body. Now, I want you to catch this too. His brothers. So Samson's parents were able to have more children after this. Remember, they had been barren. And now God gave them a son. And now God gave them more children. And he gave them more sons. We don't even know if he had sisters, but we know definitely he gave them more sons. They took him back home and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, where his father Manoah was buried. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. Chapter 17. There was a man named Micah who lived in the hill country of Ephraim. One day he said to his mother, "I heard you place a curse on the person who stole 1,100 pieces of silver from you. Well, I have the money. I was the one who took it." "The Lord bless you for admitting it," his mother replied. He returned the money to her, and she said, "I now dedicate these silver coins to the Lord. In honor of my son, I will have an image carved in an idol cast." So when he returned the money to his mother, she took 200 silver coins and gave them to a silversmith, who made them into an image and an idol. And these were in Micah's house. Micah set up a shrine for the idol, and he made a sacred ephod and some household idols. Then he installed one of his sons as his personal priest. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. This shows you that people need a leader. People not only need a leader, they want a leader. We all need to have a leader. We need to have somebody that's guiding us. We need not to walk around blind and aimlessly, just deciding. Each of us, we all have our different opinions on things. So we all need a leader who can bring about all of these things together and do the things for our good. And even God, we saw in Exodus, where God appointed leaders. We saw where the law that it came to be. And with Moses, and that he assigned leaders through Moses. That each of them, they would rule over 100, they would rule over 50, they would rule over 10. We all need leaders. One day, a young Levite who had been living in Bethlehem in Judah arrived in that area. He had left Bethlehem in search of another place to live, and as he traveled, he came to the hill country of Ephraim. He happened to stop at Micah's house as he was traveling through. "Where are you from?" Micah asked him. He replied, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am looking for a place to live." "Stay here with me," Micah said, "and you can be a father and priest to me. I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, plus a change of clothes and your food." The Levite agreed to this, and the young man became like one of Micah's sons. So Micah installed the Levite as his personal priest, and he lived in Micah's house. "I know the Lord will bless me now," Micah said, "because I have a Levite serving as my priest." See, again, they know the stories. They know the tribes. They know the stories that have been handed down through the generations. So we finished up in these first 2 chapters today. We finished up knowing the story of Samson, and then the victory and the redemption that God gave. And now we're learning about Ephraim and Micah and now living in the priest's house. And we're going to continue tomorrow as we're going to finish up chapters 18 through 21 and find out what happens here in the way God redeems and rescues once again. So join me again tomorrow for day 78 as we finish out Judges. Bye-bye.